Good evening. This is Eric Brown with Satrn News. Today's date, February 17th, 2022. Today we're going to begin the new show. Don't really have a name, but we're going to talk about today's UN Security Council meeting. All right. Today's Security Council meeting was highly skewed in a Western-dominated narrative. All right. Focusing on the pretext of war, the drumbeats of war are drumming. All right. We heard numerous rhetoric coming from various Western nations regarding the situation that's taking place on the border of Ukraine and Russia. All right. Let's take a look at first what had to be said by the United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Mr. President, this council was convened today to discuss the implementation of the Minsk agreements, a goal that we all share, despite Russia's persistent violations. These agreements, which were negotiated in 2014 and 2015 and signed by Russia, remain the basis for the peace process to resolve the conflict in eastern Ukraine. This council's primary responsibility, the very reason for its creation, is the preservation of peace and security. As we meet today, the most immediate threat to peace and security is Russia's looming aggression against Ukraine. The stakes go far beyond Ukraine. This is a moment of peril for the lives and safety of millions of people, as well as for the foundation of the United Nations Charter and the rules-based international order that preserves stability worldwide. This crisis directly affects every member of this council and every country in the world. Because the basic principles that sustain peace and security, principles that were enshrined in the wake of 2 world wars and a Cold War, are under threat. The principle that one country cannot change the borders of another by force. The principle that one country cannot dictate another's choices or policies or with whom it will associate. The principle of national sovereignty. This is the exact kind of crisis that the United Nations, and specifically this Security Council, was created to prevent. We must address what Russia is doing right now to Ukraine. Over the past months, without provocation or justification, Russia has amassed more than 150,000 troops around Ukraine's borders, in Russia, Belarus, occupied Crimea. Russia says it's drawing down those forces. We do not see that happening on the ground. Our information indicates clearly that these forces, including ground troops, aircraft, ships, are preparing to launch an attack against Ukraine in the coming days. We don't know precisely how things will play out, but here's what the world can expect to see unfold. In fact, it's unfolding right now, today, as Russia takes steps down the path to war and reissued the threat of military action. First, Russia plans to manufacture a pretext for its attack. This could be a violent event that Russia will blame on Ukraine, or an outrageous accusation that Russia will level against the Ukrainian government. We don't know exactly the form it will take. It could be a fabricated so-called terrorist bombing inside Russia, the invented discovery of a mass grave, a staged drone strike against civilians, or a fake, even a real, attack using chemical weapons. Russia may describe this event as ethnic cleansing or a genocide, making a mockery of a concept that we in this chamber do not take lightly, nor do I take lightly, based on my family history. In the past few days, Russian media has already begun to spread some of these false alarms and claims to maximize public outrage, to lay the groundwork for an invented justification for war. Today, that drumbeat is only intensified in Russia's state-controlled media. We've heard some of these basic allegations from Russian-backed speakers here today. Second, in response to this manufactured provocation, the highest levels of the Russian government may theatrically convene emergency meetings to address the so-called crisis. The government will issue proclamations declaring that Russia must respond to defend Russian citizens or ethnic Russians in Ukraine. Next, the attack is planned to begin. Russian missiles and bombs will drop across Ukraine. Communications will be jammed. Cyber attacks will shut down key Ukrainian institutions. After that, Russian tanks and soldiers will advance on key targets that have already been identified and mapped out in detailed plans. We believe these targets include Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, a city of 2.8 million people. And conventional attacks are not all that Russia plans to inflict upon the people of Ukraine. We have information that indicates Russia will target specific groups of Ukrainians. We've been warning the Ukrainian government of all that is coming. And here today, we are laying it out in great detail with the hope that by sharing what we know with the world, we can influence Russia to abandon the path of war and choose a different path while there's still time. Now, I'm mindful that some have called into question our information, recalling previous instances where intelligence ultimately did not bear out. But let me be clear. I am here today not to start a war, but to prevent one. The information I presented here is validated by what we've seen unfolding in plain sight before our eyes for months. And remember that while Russia has repeatedly derided our warnings and alarms as melodrama and nonsense, they have been steadily amassing more than 150,000 troops on Ukraine's borders, as well as the capabilities to conduct a massive military assault. It isn't just us seeing this. Allies and partners see the same thing. And Russia hasn't only been hearing from us. The international chorus has grown louder and louder. If Russia doesn't invade Ukraine, then we will be relieved that Russia changed course and proved our predictions wrong. That would be a far better outcome than the course we're currently on. And we'll gladly accept any criticism that anyone directs at us. As President Biden said, this would be a war of choice. And if Russia makes that choice, we've been clear, along with allies and partners, that our response will be sharp and decisive. President Biden reiterated that forcefully earlier this week. There's another choice Russia can still make if there's any truth to its claim that it's committed to diplomacy. Diplomacy is the only responsible way to resolve this crisis. An essential part of this is through implementation of the Minsk agreements, the subject of our session today. There are a series of commitments that Russia and Ukraine made under Minsk, with the OSCE and the Normandy format partners involved as well. If Russia is prepared to sit with the Ukrainian government and work through the process of implementing these commitments, our friends in France and Germany stand ready to convene senior-level discussions in the Normandy format to settle these issues. Ukraine is ready for this, and we stand fully ready to support the parties. Progress toward resolving the Donbass crisis through the Minsk agreements can reinforce the broader discussions on security issues that we're prepared to engage in with Russia, in coordination with our allies and partners. More than 3 weeks ago, we provided Russia with a paper that detailed concrete reciprocal steps that we can take in the near term to address our respective concerns and advance the collective security interests of Russia, the United States, and our European partners and allies. This morning, we received a response, which we're evaluating. Earlier today, I sent a letter to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, proposing that we meet next week in Europe, following on our talks in recent weeks, to discuss the steps that we can take to resolve this crisis without conflict. We're also proposing meetings of the NATO-Russia Council and the OSCE Permanent Council. These meetings can pave the way for a summit of key leaders in the context of de-escalation to reach understandings on our mutual security concerns. As lead diplomats for our nations, we have a responsibility to make every effort for diplomacy to succeed, to leave no diplomatic stone unturned. If Russia's committed to diplomacy, we're presenting every opportunity for it to demonstrate that commitment. I have no doubt that the response to my remarks here today will be more dismissals from the Russian government about the United States stoking hysteria or that it has no plans to invade Ukraine. So let me make this simple. The Russian government can announce today, with no qualification, equivocation, or deflection, that Russia will not invade Ukraine. State it clearly, state it plainly to the world, and then demonstrate it by sending your troops, your tanks, your planes back to their barracks and hangars, and sending your diplomats to the negotiating table. In the coming days, the world will remember that commitment, or the refusal to make it. I yield the floor.
All right. With regards to what the Secretary of State had to say, I guess you'll have to make your own determination whether it's fact or fiction. All right, but we've heard numerous rhetoric coming out of both sides, Russia, Ukraine, as well as the Western powers, as well as the United States of America. Over the last couple of weeks, we've also heard chatter at the press podium from the White House regarding false flags, as the Secretary of State mentioned, regards to his speculation. All right. Now we see a Western-dominated narrative that's being pushed. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Minsk agreement. There's one and as well as two. We're going to go ahead and begin at one. All right. This is coming out of Ukrainian Independent News Agency, which will be on the screen. Let me put that up so you can see it. All right, let's see if that slides over. All right. If we take a look at it, we have number one. This is from the Minsk Agreement, February 12th, 2015. All right, an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire in individual areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine. Is strict information starting at 00 hours, February 15th, 2015. All right. Number two, the withdrawal of all heavy weapons by both parties at equal distance in order to create at least 50-kilometer security zone, 100 millimeters of large caliber artillery systems, and 70 kilometers security zone for grand multiple rocket launcher systems, and 140-kilometer security zone for Tornado S and S-Merch multiple rocket launcher systems. All right. I'm going to go ahead and, because it's going to take a while to take a look at, I'm going to go ahead and kind of paraphrase what we have before us. All right. This is coming from 2015, and we're taking this as we speak from Reuters. All right. I'll actually go ahead and read that in its entirety, so you can get the gist of what's going on. All right. Minsk 1. Ukraine and Russia-backed separatists agreed a 12-point ceasefire deal in the capital of Belarus in September 2014. Its provisions include prisoner exchanges, deliveries of humanitarian aid, and the withdrawal of heavy weapons. 5 months into the conflict, that by point had killed more than 2,600 people, a toll that has risen to more than 14,000 now, according to the Ukrainian government. The agreement quickly broke down with violations by both sides. All right. We're going to take a look at what it is. Now on the screen we have, coming from, as I said, the Ukrainian Independent News Agency. We're going to paraphrase those. It's kind of quite long, coming from these 13 points. All right. But I will keep those on the screen as I go through this. All right. As I already said, the immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. All right. Number two, withdrawal of all heavy weapons by both sides. Number three, monitoring and verification by the CE. All right. Now the OSCE, for those that don't know, is the Organization of Security for Cooperative Cooperation in Europe. All right. Number 4, to start a dialogue of interim self-government for the Donetsk and Luhansk region in accordance with Ukrainian law and acknowledge their special status by a resolution of parliament. All right, let me see if you can still see those. Let me scroll this up. All right. 5, a pardon and amnesty for people involved in the fighting. 6, an exchange of hostages and prisoners. 7, provisions of humanitarian assistance. 8, resumption of socioeconomic ties, including pensions. 9, restore full control of the state border by government of Ukraine. 10, scroll that up so you can see it, the withdrawal of all foreign armed formations, military equipment, and mercenaries. 11, constitutional reforms in Ukraine, including decentralization with special mention of Donetsk and Luhansk. 12, elections in Donetsk and Luhansk on terms to be agreed by their representatives. And 13, intensify the work on a trilateral contact group, including representatives of Russia, Ukraine, as well as the OSCE. All right. If we go to now this is coming from Chatham House out of the UK. They titled this "The Minsk Conundrum: Western Policy and Russia's War in Eastern Ukraine." All right. The Minsk II agreement. All right. Sections that address the matter. Let's scroll down. We already covered the 13 points covered in Minsk 1. All right. But Minsk 2, let's take a look at it. We got Article 4, elections in Donbass. Article 9, the process of reestablishing full control over the Ukraine border. Article 11, constitutional reforms. Article 12, elections. All right. It's a lot going on here. As I said before, you'll have to make the determination of where we're headed. But it's kind of heavy. On the screen, I have the CIA World Fact Book regarding Russia. All right. Take a look at that as well if you aren't familiar with the region, as well as the CIA Fact Book regarding Ukraine. Take a look at that. Haven't finished implementing the CIA World Fact Book on SaturnNews.com. We're in the process of doing that. Things are gotten kind of pushed back. I have some other work to do regarding some other things that I'm working on. All right. But I would like to play a section coming from one of the presentations that took place earlier. All right. Now we have 4 presentations. Got one from Undersecretary General Mosre DiCarlo, OSCE, Kinnaman, CM Sevic, and we have Tetyana. Let's go ahead and take a look at what Tetyana had to say. All right, let me go ahead and put that in position. All right. All right. Let's scroll. Let me make sure. Boom, boom, boom. Let's listen to what she had to say. This is Boots on the Ground.
I would like to say to you this. I am completely certain that you all know very well that never, ever, ever the authorities in Kiev had the intention of implementing either the first package of Minsk agreements and much less so the second Minsk agreements. This is simply a pause to be able to say, yes, we're going to implement that. In the meantime, we'll receive weapons from NATO, our armed forces will become stronger, and we do hope that in some time later we will be able to get back the rebellious republics by force. It's not only they do not want to talk to the republics, and this was said by Zelensky directly just now. He said that he sees no reason to have dialogue with Donetsk and Luhansk. They do not want to have conversations with the civil society, even within Ukraine. People who do not want to go to Europe or NATO, people who are against the coup d'etat, who want to live in peace and friendship in Russia and other countries. These people, not only are they not represented within Ukrainian politics at all, they are being criminally prosecuted. I'm a criminal lawyer. Ruslan Kataba simply posted a video on YouTube saying that he is in favor of peace and against war in Donbass. And he has been trial since 2015, and the accusation is high treason. I went to Donbass personally to visit one of the commanders, now dead, Mr. Moscovoy, so as to take a detainee back. And I saw a huge number of people whose only fault is that they're against Maidan, against coup d'etat, against NATO and Europe. And you now want to tell me that those people who sit in judgment over other peoples because they have placed a like in social networks, people who closed all opposition channels, who are prosecuting all opposition politics, that these people are going to hold conversation with Donetsk and Luhansk. It is very clear that this is in principle a possibility. This is a matter and antimatter. They annihilate each other. So what is the problem? What was the difficulty to provide a special status in the past 5 years? They are not going to do that because any different thinking in Ukraine is being squashed. People who are in Ukraine against Maidan, against a coup d'etat, against war, they're enemies of the people. They have no right to take the floors anywhere at all. They have no political parties. They have no civil society associations. They have no right to speak in their country. They don't have that right at all. And of course, even after that, how can you ask that Kiev be talking to Lugansk and Donetsk? I am sure you understand that this will never, ever, ever happen. One of the previous speakers said, well, that I regret that despite the efforts of Germany and France, the Kiev regime does not want to implement the Kiev agreements. I'm certain that the West allows the Kiev regime to non-implement. If this were not the case, all of the Minsk agreements would have been implemented a long time ago. Please do not say that Kiev is an independent entity here, that Ukraine is independent. It is a colony of a collective West, where everything is decided by the people who came in from the outside, who organized the Maidan and the coup d'etat and plunged my country into slavery. And these are the same people stand in the way of implementing the Minsk agreement. And they will not allow the agreements to be implemented. I'm certain of it, because the real goal of the West, despite all the peace-loving speeches I've heard, including here, is to make sure that Kiev attacks the republics and that Russia is bogged into this war. No explanation for the Western hysterics when they say that Russia is about to invade. And Biden just said, I just listened to it as we were having this meeting, That's what he said. There is no other goal that the West has. The only goal is to organize war. If this were not the case, then the puppet government of Ukraine would have been compelled to implement the Minsk agreements a long time ago. And since this is not taking place, then we can state one thing and one thing only. The West wants a war with Russia. And it wants that war to take place on the territory of Ukraine. We are not a chessboard. We are a people of Ukraine. And the people in the unrecognized republics are simply pawns in political games. There's nothing else that can be said here. And I am sure that you yourselves understand that very well. I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to say this to your face. I am convinced that you will lead the events to a war. The events today in the republics when they were shelled throughout the contact line have convinced me of that completely. Ukraine, the Kiev regime, for almost 8 years have been shelling about 100,000 people using heavy artillery. OSCE have the moniker of blind observers in the territories react to this not at all. That side which is under the control of the Kiev regime, children are not killed. Not a single child has been killed, and buildings are standing up. This only happens in the unrecognized republic, and I visited them personally. I am telling you this about firsthand because I traveled down the entire contact line and I saw how peaceful civilians, unprotected, vulnerable people are being killed. The people who did not manage to leave, their old people, their women with children, or their handicapped. Those who could have left the area a long time ago. So these long-suffering people are hostages there, and they're in the number of 100,000. And the entire Europe is, for the 8th year running, looking duplicitously at the suffering of these people, whilst at the same time saying that there is no alternative to the Minsk agreements. Well, fine, then compel your marionettes from the Kiev regime to implement them, and please, or stop saying that there is no alternative to them. I thank you for your attention.
All right, I'm going to pause that for a second. You heard Tetyana Montyan, I think that's her name, regarding rhetoric that's coming out. She has her side. The United States has their side, as well as their Western allies. Like I said before, you'll have to make your own determination to whether what's fact or fiction. All right, but again, we do see the drum beats of war heating up. Now, as these pretext, conjecture, as well as rhetoric are coming out regarding Russia and Ukraine, speculation as put forth by the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and I can imagine a lot, but that was a lot coming from the Secretary. All right. I don't really want to play any other Western states' statements today at the meeting, but what I will play is a third party. That this is coming from the ambassador from China. Let me go ahead and find that. All right, and we'll play that. All right. Let me scroll. Where is he? I think he spoke after Mexico. There he is, right there. All right.
Single direction, détente, diplomacy, and dialogue. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Mexico for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
I thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank you for presiding over today's meeting. My thanks also go to USG Rosemary DiCarlo, Ambassador Miko Kinun, Special Representative of the OSCE Chairperson in Office, and Ambassador Khalid Shevik, Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, for their briefings. I also listened carefully to the remarks made by Ms. Tetyana Montyan. February 12th this year marked the 7th anniversary of the new Minsk Agreements. Consideration of the implementation of the new Minsk Agreements is the subject of this Council meeting. Universally recognized, the agreements is a fundamental and binding political document for the settlement of the Ukraine issue, and was unanimously endorsed by the Security Council in its Resolution 2202. Therefore, it deserves complete and effective implementation by all the parties concerned. Regrettably, however, to date, the majority of the agreement's provisions have yet to be truly implemented. New ceasefire violations have occurred on the line of contact. China believes that the effort to resolve the Ukraine issue must, after all, go back to the starting point, that is, the implementation of the new Minsk Agreements. We hope that all parties concerned will take a constructive posture, resolve through dialogue and consultation whatever differences that may arise in the implementation of the agreements, and draw up a roadmap and timetable to implement the agreements to the letter without delay, so as to pave the way for a political solution to the Ukraine crisis. Mr. President, as to the tensions on the eastern frontier of Ukraine, China believes that in the current context, all parties concerned should let reason prevail, adhere to the overarching goal of a political solution, and refrain from any act that may provoke tensions or embellish the discourse about the crisis. The parties should fully consider each other's legitimate security concerns and show mutual respect, and on such a basis, properly resolve their differences through equal-footed consultations. China supports all efforts conducive to easing the tensions and notes the Russian Federation's recent diplomatic engagement with France, Germany, and other European countries at the leadership level. A negotiated, balanced, effective, and sustainable European security mechanism will provide a solid foundation for lasting peace and stability across Europe. We trust that European countries will take independent and strategic decisions in line with their own interests. In his most recent public appeal, Secretary-General Guterres said, quote, "There is no alternative to diplomacy. All issues, including the most intractable, can and must be addressed and resolved through diplomatic frameworks," end quote. We support the SG's good offices aimed at reducing tensions. We also subscribe to the SG's views. Mr. President, everything happens for a reason. NATO's enlargement is an issue that cannot be bypassed when dealing with the current tensions related to the Ukraine issue. NATO's continuous expansion in the wake of the Cold War runs counter to the trend of our times, that is, to maintain common security. One country's security cannot be obtained at the expense of another country's security. By the same token, regional security cannot be guaranteed through muscling up or even expanding a military bloc. This applies as much to the European region as to other regions of the world. There is one country that refuses to renounce its Cold War mentality. It says one thing and does another. In order to seek absolute military superiority, it has been clanning up in the Asia-Pacific region, creating some trilateral and quadrilateral small circles or cliques bent on provoking confrontation. What it is doing would only throw the Asia-Pacific into division and turmoil and seriously threaten the region's peace and stability to the detriment of the countries in the region while gaining nothing for itself either. China urges the countries concerned to learn from history, subscribe to the notion of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, adhere to the approach of enhancing mutual trust and settling disputes through dialogue and consultation, and do more to contribute to world peace and regional stability. I thank you, Mr. President.
I think.
All right. We're going to bring this to a close, but before I do, I'm going to read some segments coming from Henry Kissinger's book on diplomacy. So quite a great read if you're into that sort of thing. All right. I'm going to start off by taking a look at, these are the sections that I'm going to read. Pages 832 through 834. All right. And 835. And I'm just reading the sections that I've highlighted, all right? While this plays on the screen, as you can see, on the screen we have the representative from Albania, all right? In launching itself for the third time in this century on creating a new world order, America's dominant task is to strike a balance between the twin temptations inherent in exceptionalism, the notion that America must remedy every wrong and stabilize every dislocation. In the intent to withdraw itself, all right, indiscriminate involvement in all ethnic turmoil and civil wars of the post-Cold War world would drain a crusade in America. All right, let's skip forward. All right, when in 1821 John Quincy Adams warned America against its penchant to slay distant monsters. All right. America's leaders have generally stressed motivation over structure. They have placed more emphasis on affecting the attitudes than the calculations of their counterparts. As a result, American society is peculiarly ambivalent about the lessons of history. The rejection of history extols the image of a universal man, living by universal maxims, regardless of the past, of geography, or other immutable circumstances. American policymakers have generally preferred multilateral approaches to national ones. The agendas of disarmament, non-proliferation, and human rights, rather than essentially national geopolitical or strategic issues. A country with America's idealistic tradition cannot base its policy on the balance of power as the sole criterion for a new world order. All right, let's skip forward. All right. In the post-World War world, such an attitude would turn innocence into self-indulgence. At a time when America is able neither to dominate the world nor to withdraw from it, when it finds itself both all-powerful and totally vulnerable, it must not abandon the ideals which have accounted for its greatness. But neither must it jeopardize that greatness by fostering illusions about the extent of its reach. For America, in association with realpolitik, must take into account the core values of the first society in history to have been explicitly created in the name of liberty. Yet America's survival and progress will depend as well on its ability to make choices which reflect contemporary reality. Otherwise, foreign policy will turn into self-righteous posturing. All right. What no leader must ever do is to suggest that choice has no price, or that no balance needs to be struck. American idealism remains as essential as ever, perhaps even more so. But in the New World Order, its role will be to provide the faith to sustain America through all ambiguities of choice in the imperfect world. Traditional American idealism must combine with a thoughtful assessment of contemporary realities to bring about a usable definition of American interests. Americans' ideal will have to be sought in the patient accumulation of partial success. The certitudes of physical threat and hostile ideologies characteristic of the Cold War are gone. The convictions needed to master the emerging world order are more abstract. A vision of the future that cannot be demonstrated when it is put forward in judgments about the relationship between hope and possibility that are, in their essence, conjectural. The Wilsonian goals of America's past, peace, stability, progress, and freedom for mankind, will have to be sought in a journey that has no end. Traveler says, a Spanish proverb, there are no roads. Roads are made by walking. All right. Now, we heard today primarily three main focuses during today's meeting, which was Ukrainian sovereignty, independence, as well as territorial integrity. Now, like I said before, you have to make your own determination. What's fact, what's fiction, what you believe, don't you believe. But this situation is definitely heating up, and our world is being reset. All right. I don't really take the sentiment of Secretary Kissinger regarding a new world order. I believe that we're in the next world order. When I'm more prepared, I'll get into the intricacies of what it is that I'm talking about. All right. This has been Eric Brown for Saturn News, February 17th, 2022.